My wife discovered our child wasn't mine after a doctor's secret scheme until I uncovered the DNA truth, exposed his crimes, and took back Future. I never believed in fate, but if fate had a sense of humor, it was as dark as the whiskey in my glass. That night started as a joke, just another dumb idea fueled by too much alcohol and too little common sense. 5 old friends, drunk on nostalgia and bourbon, sitting around my backyard fire pit, reminiscing about college, our dumbest bets, our worst breakups. The kind of night where you feel invincible, like you're still 25, like life didn't already sink its claws into you with mortgages, kids, and marriages that felt more like long-term treaties than love stories. Then Mark, always the reckless one, leaned back in his chair, smirking like he was about to drop some world-class stupidity. "Hey, you ever see those DNA test commercials?" he slurred. "You spit in a tube, they tell you you're part Viking or whatever." Brian snorted. "Yeah, and then they sell your data to the government. Hard pass." Mark ignored him, waving his phone. "No, but listen, what if we all took one? See if any of us are secretly brothers or, hell, maybe we're long-lost royalty." It was stupid. It was pointless. And that's exactly why we did it. We ordered them right then and there, 5 drunk idiots laughing about whether Mike was secretly French or if Brian was actually related to his bald boss. We didn't even tell our wives, because why would we? It was a joke. A month passed. I forgot about it until the results came in. That night, we met up at my place again, minus the fire pit but plus a few 6-packs. I had the envelopes lined up on my kitchen counter, one for each of us. The plan was to read them out loud, roast each other for whatever came up, and move on with our lives. All right, let's do this. I tore mine open first, eyes skimming past the ancestry junk, mostly British, some German, a sprinkle of Scandinavian, whatever. I glanced at my genetic relatives tab, nothing surprising, just a couple of 3rd and 4th cousins. Then Brian opened his, then Mark, then Mike, then Ethan. Silence. I looked up from my phone, expecting to see smug grins, dumb jokes, but instead I saw confusion. Furrowed brows, nervous laughter that didn't quite land. "That's weird," Brian muttered. "Says I have a close relative I don't recognize." "Yeah, same," Mike said, scrolling through his results. Extremely close, like immediate family close." Mark let out a breathy laugh, shaking his head. "Man, this is... Hold up, what the hell?" I looked down at my screen again. My heart did this weird slow-motion stumble in my chest. One name appeared under every single one of our kids' biological relatives tab. One name that none of us recognized. It wasn't any of us. It wasn't a grandfather, an uncle, a distant cousin. It was one man, a single genetic match linking 5 children. A stranger. My skin went cold. My stomach flipped like I was falling off the edge of something I couldn't see. This has to be a mistake, right?" Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. He was gripping his phone like it might shatter in his hands. I swallowed hard. My mind was already running every possible explanation, but none of them made sense. This wasn't a random cousin mix-up. This was immediate. It was biological. It was undeniable. Mike was the first to say it out loud. "If this is right, none of our kids are ours." The words landed like a gunshot. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The air felt thick, suffocating, charged with something primal and ugly. I felt my pulse in my throat. My hands were shaking. "Wait, hold on," Brian said suddenly, his voice edged with panic. "Maybe we're reading this wrong. Maybe it's some kind of weird statistical glitch." Ethan cut him off. "There's no glitch. This is DNA, Brian." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Mark, who had been dead silent for the last 2 minutes, suddenly grabbed his phone and started tapping furiously. "Screw this," he muttered. "I'm getting the extended report. I want to know who this guy is." Nobody stopped him. Nobody argued. We just stood there, watching, waiting, praying to whatever cruel God was listening that this was all just some colossal screw-up. A few long, excruciating minutes later, Mark's screen refreshed. His face went blank. I don't think I'll ever forget the way his eyes flicked up, wide and hollow, looking at each of us in turn before he said the one name that shattered everything we thought we knew. And just like that, the joke was over. Silence stretched between us like a noose tightening with every second that passed. The name Mark had just uttered hung in the air, an impossible, ridiculous, horrifying truth we weren't ready to swallow. Mike shook his head first. "No, there's no way." Mark didn't say anything. He just turned his phone toward us. The name was there, clear as day, Dr. Matthew Carter. A name we all knew. I felt like the walls were closing in. My stomach churned. The pediatrician? The family doctor, Mark corrected, his voice hollow. The guy who saw all our wives through their pregnancies. The guy who delivered our kids. The word sent a sickening jolt through me. I turned to Brian, waiting for him to laugh, to call it a mistake, but his face was pale, his breathing uneven. Mike ran a hand down his face. All right, let's think. There has to be an explanation. Maybe he's in the database because he treated our kids and there's some kind of... That's not how DNA works. Ethan snapped. He was pacing, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. This isn't some administrative error. His DNA is in all our kids. Do you get what that means? Nobody wanted to say it, but we were all thinking it. It meant our wives had either knowingly or unknowingly carried his children. Mark took a slow breath, his grip on his phone white-knuckled. This has to be some kind of sick, elaborate scam, right? I mean, come on, the same guy for all of us? What are the damn odds? Maybe not so impossible, Brian muttered, rubbing his temples like he was trying to wake up from a bad dream. Think about it. Who had access? Who was there every step of the way? That doesn't mean... Ethan stopped pacing. It does. And you know it. It was an ugly realization. One that came in waves. We started grasping for details. Memories that once seemed insignificant, now forming a pattern too disturbing to ignore. Mike was the first to dig something up. I remember my wife mentioning something about an experimental fertility supplement. Said Dr. Carter recommended it to help with conception chances. She didn't think much of it at the time. Said it was just vitamins. Ethan's face went slack. Same. My wife said something similar. She was worried we might struggle to conceive, and he reassured her, told her not to worry, that modern medicine had options. A chill ran through me. My wife had some kind of routine monitoring in her second trimester. Carter said it was to ensure a healthy pregnancy. But now I'm wondering what the hell he was really checking for. Mark swallowed hard. This guy, he had access to them in their most vulnerable state. What if... He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Nobody wanted to say the words. What if it wasn't just an affair? What if this wasn't consensual? The idea made my skin crawl. Brian let out a strangled laugh, shaking his head. Nope, I don't buy it. There's got to be another explanation. Maybe he's just a close genetic match, like a distant cousin. Mike cut him off. It says biological father, Brian. Brian's hands clenched into fists. His eyes were wild, desperate, looking for a way out of this nightmare. Then the tests are wrong. They have to be wrong. Maybe someone hacked the results, or maybe it's a damn prank. Ethan slammed his fist down on the counter, rattling the beer bottles. Stop! His voice was sharp, final. You know this isn't a prank. Brian opened his mouth, then closed it. He was shaking. None of us wanted to believe it, because if it was true, if our wives really carried this man's children, then our lives were built on a foundation of lies. Mike exhaled slowly. All right, we don't panic. Not yet. We need to be sure. How? I asked. Mark met my eyes, his expression hardening. We dig deep. We weren't ready to accept it. Not yet. The whole thing felt too impossible, too absurd. It had to be a mistake, or a coincidence or something. So we did what any sane men would do when their entire reality was on the verge of collapse. We hunted. Step 1. Surveillance. Ethan had a friend, some ex-military guy who owed him a favor. Within 24 hours, we had Carter's entire schedule mapped out. Every morning, he left his mansion in a gated community at 7:15 a.m. sharp, drove his black Tesla to his private clinic, worked until noon, long lunch at the same overpriced restaurant, back to the clinic, done by 5. Golf or tennis after work 3 days a week, Sundays at the club. Thursdays, he had business meetings at a high-end hotel downtown. He lived like a king. And then, there was her. We weren't the only ones Carter had fooled. His wife, Emily, had been married to him for over 20 years. 2 grown kids, both in college. To the outside world, they were the perfect power couple. Carter, the brilliant, charming doctor, and Emily, the elegant, charity-running socialite. But the more we dug, the more cracks we found. Emily wasn't just another trophy wife. She was old money, and her family had funded a big chunk of Carter's early career. His entire empire was built on her wealth, her name. Without her, he was just another overpaid doctor. And that's when we realized his Achilles heel wasn't just his reputation, it was his marriage. Step 2. The weak spot. Mike was the one who found it. A few well-placed questions at the country club, some casual small talk with the right people, and suddenly we had our first real weapon. Dr. Carter wasn't just a liar, he was a serial cheater. Not just hotel meetings, not just affairs. He had a pattern: younger women, nurses, assistants, patients. And Emily? She had no idea. The moment Mike told us, I could practically feel the shift in the air. We weren't just a bunch of angry husbands anymore. We were architects, and we were about to design the perfect collapse. Step 3. The first strike. Exposing the DNA scandal? That would be too simple, too quick, too easy for him to recover from. No. Carter needed to watch everything he built crumble, slowly, piece by piece, while knowing exactly who was behind it. And that started with his wife. So we made contact. Ethan sent the first message. A simple, anonymous email to Emily Carter's private account. Your husband isn't who you think he is. Attached were photos. His car parked outside the hotel, a grainy but clear image of him in the lobby, his arm around a much younger woman, a time-stamped receipt from the hotel bar. No accusations. No threats. Just the truth, served ice cold. And now we waited. We expected a reaction, a crack in the facade, some sign that Carter had felt the first tremors of the earthquake we'd set in motion. But the man was a damn statue. The next time we saw him, he was smiling. It was at the country club again, just a few days after we sent the email to his wife. We were sitting at the outdoor bar, watching him from a distance. No signs of stress, no frantic phone calls, no sudden changes in routine. If Emily had seen the email, it hadn't reached him yet. Or worse, he didn't care. Then he spotted us. And he walked over. Carter slid onto the stool next to Ethan, ordering his usual whiskey neat, like we were just another group of guys enjoying a drink. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. "Ah, my old patience," he said, tilting his glass toward us. "You've been watching me lately. Feels like I should start charging you for consultations." Mike's knuckles turned white around his beer bottle. I forced a smile. "We just find you fascinating." Carter smirked, took a sip of his whiskey. "Yeah, I get that a lot." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough to sound conspiratorial. "So tell me, what exactly do you think you know?" Ethan's entire body tensed. This bastard wasn't worried. He wasn't scrambling for a cover story, wasn't even pretending to be oblivious. He was toying with us. Mike exhaled slowly. "You really want to do this?" Carter just chuckled. "Do what, gentlemen? I don't know what wild theories you've cooked up, but let's be honest here." He swirled his glass, watching the liquid move like he was bored. "Even if you had something, even if you thought you could take me down, what exactly do you plan to do?" That's when Mark lost it. His chair scraped back violently as he stood, hands clenched into fists. "You think this is a game?" His voice was low, shaking with barely contained rage. Carter didn't even flinch. Instead, he laughed, not nervous laughter, not forced, genuine. "Mark, Mark, Mark." He shook his head, smiling like a parent amused by a child's tantrum. "That temper of yours, it's going to get you in trouble someday." Mike grabbed Mark's wrist before he could move. "Not here," he muttered under his breath. "Not like this." Carter smirked again and downed the rest of his drink. "Smart friend you've got there," he said, setting the empty glass on the bar. Then he stood up, stretched like he didn't have a single worry in the world. "Well, this has been fun, but I've got places to be. You gentlemen enjoy the rest of your evening." He walked away, completely at ease. And that's when I knew. He wasn't just rich, he wasn't just arrogant, he truly believed he was untouchable, which meant taking him down wouldn't just be about exposing the truth, it had to be worse. It had to hurt. 2 days later, the first warning shot landed. Ethan got home from work to find a thick cream-colored envelope waiting for him. No return address, no markings, just his name printed in clean, professional font. Inside, a cease and desist letter from one of the top law firms in the city. It was short and to the point. "Mr. Ethan Wallace, it has come to our attention that you and several individuals have engaged in defamatory behavior against our client, Dr. Matthew Carter. This includes but is not limited to false allegations, harassment, and unauthorized surveillance. Should this behavior continue, we will be forced to pursue legal action, including claims of defamation, harassment, and invasion of privacy. We strongly recommend that you cease any and all activities related to Dr. Carter immediately." No signature, No direct contact from Carter himself, just a cold, calculated warning. Ethan wasn't the only one who got one. By the end of the night, all 5 of us had matching letters. Mike was the first to speak, his voice tight with controlled fury. He was expecting this. I clenched my jaw. Of course he was. He's been doing this for years. You think we're the first ones to put things together? Brian let out a breath, shaking his head. Then why hasn't anyone taken him down before? Why hasn't this blown up? Ethan scoffed, waving his letter. This is why. The moment someone gets too close, he throws money at lawyers to make it all disappear. Mike slammed his fist on the table. No. We are not letting this fur get away with it. But reality was sinking in fast. Carter had the money, the connections, the legal power to make our lives hell before we ever had a chance to fight back. If we went at him like this, throwing accusations, acting out of rage, he'd bury us before we could land a single hit. And that's when it clicked. We're playing this wrong, I muttered, staring at the letter. Mark frowned. What do you mean? I exhaled. We're playing by his rules. We're reacting. Every move we've made he's already accounted for. He was waiting for us to try something reckless. This whole legal stunt, it's meant to make us panic, force us into a defensive position. Mike leaned forward. So what do? I looked at each of them in turn. We stop acting like pissed-off husbands. I toss the letter onto the table. And we start acting like men who are about to ruin someone's life. We weren't going to fight Carter head-on. We were going to dismantle him from the inside out. If Carter wanted to play chess, we were done being pawns. We spent the next week planning, not just a simple takedown. No, that would be too easy. Carter had spent years covering his tracks, building defenses, ensuring that if anyone ever came for him, they'd be left grasping at air. So we had to be smarter, meaner. We had to go after the things he couldn't protect, his money, his reputation, his legacy. Step 1. The financial trap. Ethan had a friend in real estate, one of those guys who knew all the backdoor deals, the legal loopholes, the kind of money laundering schemes that rich men like Carter used to keep their hands clean. Turns out Carter wasn't just a doctor. He was an investor. And not just in clinics. He had a stake in private fertility labs, biotech startups, and most interestingly, a little-known medical fund that specialized in reproductive research. A fund that, on paper, was completely legitimate. But in practice, it had fraud written all over it. The more we dug, the more it became obvious. Carter had been funneling money into this fund for years, some of it likely clean, some of it less so. We set a trap. Through Ethan's contact, we arranged for a fake investment opportunity, an exclusive expansion project that promised lucrative partnerships with international fertility clinics. It was the kind of high-stakes, low-risk deal that men like Carter couldn't resist. We fed the bait through all the right channels, whispered about it in the same circles he moved in, made sure the paperwork looked just real enough to be undeniable. And then we waited. It took less than a week for Carter's name to show up on a preliminary interest form. Hook, line, sinker. Step 2. The reputation kill shot. The financial trap was just the beginning. We needed to humiliate him. So we went for the one thing even money couldn't fix: public exposure. Mike's wife had a cousin, Sarah, who just so happened to be a journalist, not some small-time blogger, but a legit investigative reporter who had a nose for medical scandals. We fed her everything: anonymous emails, documents, old medical records showing suspicious patterns in Carter's clinic, a growing list of families whose children's DNA didn't match their father's. We painted the picture for her, step by step, leading her exactly where we wanted. And when she started digging, she found even more. There were other doctors involved, a whole network of shady fertility practices, unauthorized procedures, misfiled medical records. It wasn't just Carter, it was bigger. And Sarah, she knew she had something huge. We watched from the shadows as she built the story, reached out to victims, gathered evidence. She was meticulous, patient, ruthless, the kind of journalist who wouldn't release a word until she had a bulletproof case. And once she did, there wouldn't be a single hole for Carter to hide in. Step 3. The final blow. We needed a cherry on top, something that would make sure Carter didn't just lose his career, he lost everything. So we went back to Emily, Carter's wife. We had already cracked the surface, planted the seed of doubt, but now we handed her everything. A second anonymous email. This time, not just proof of his infidelities, Not just proof of his fraudulent investments, but the full story, how he had lied, manipulated, used his own patients as test subjects, how his entire career was built on deception. It was the kind of truth no marriage could survive, no empire could survive. And then we sat back and watched it burn. It was all coming together. The trap was set, the pieces were moving, and Carter, smug, untouchable Carter, was walking right into it, until he reminded us exactly why men like him stay on top, until he hit back hard. It started with Mark. He had just gotten home from work when he noticed something was off. His wife, Jessica, was pale, gripping her phone like it had burned her hand. Their son, Tyler, was on the couch, oblivious, watching cartoons. "Jess?" Mark frowned. "What's wrong?" She turned the phone around. An email. No subject line. Just a single sentence. "Tell your husband to stop digging or you'll regret it." Attached was a photo of Tyler. Not some old picture pulled from social media. No, this was fresh. A shot of Tyler in their driveway taken that morning. Mark went cold. He stepped outside, scanning the street, looking for anything, anyone, out of place. Nothing. No cars he didn't recognize. No figures lurking in the shadows. Just the usual quiet suburban street. And that scared him more than anything. He called us immediately. His voice was shaking. "This isn't just a fing game anymore." We met at my house that night. No bar, no public places. Just the five of us, sitting in my living room, the tension thick enough to choke on. Mark was pacing, fists clenched, barely keeping himself together. "This is," he snapped. "They're watching us, watching our families." Ethan was leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "Yeah. Because we're getting close." Mark turned on him. "Easy for you to say. They didn't send you a goddamn picture of your kid." Silence. Mike exhaled slowly. "So what do? Pull out?" The words hung in the air. We had options. We could drop everything. Walk away. Let Carter get away with it. Let him keep his fortune, his reputation, his smug fing smile. But if we backed off now, he wouldn't just win. He'd make sure we never forgot who was in charge. And if he got away with it, how many more families would he ruin? I looked at Mark. "If you want out, you're out. No one would blame you." He hesitated, then clenched his jaw. "No, F that. I'm not letting him get away with this." Ethan nodded. "Then we go all in." I glanced at the clock. Sarah's article was set to go live in less than 48 hours. The financial sting operation was already in motion. Carter was about to step on a landmine he wouldn't see coming. But if he was already watching us this closely, it meant we had less time than we thought. We had to move now. Carter had spent years building his fortress, his wealth, his reputation, his carefully curated image of a brilliant doctor and devoted family man. We burned it all down in less than 48 hours. Sarah's article went live at exactly 8 a.m. By 8:30, it had over 10,000 shares. By noon, it was everywhere. Renowned fertility doctor tied to genetic scandal. Hundreds of families affected. The article was brutal. It laid out everything. His shady medical trials, the anonymous DNA results, the misfiled medical records that suggested years of manipulation. There were interviews from former patients, testimonials from women who suddenly weren't so sure how they had conceived. And the real kicker, Sarah didn't just suggest wrongdoing. She had proof. Because while we were setting up Carter's financial trap, Sarah had been digging even deeper. Turns out Carter had done this before, years ago, different city, different clinic. And that case? It had disappeared, settled, out of court, buried under legal agreements and hush money, but not anymore. Now it was public. Now the whole world knew. At the same time the article dropped, Ethan's trap snapped shut. Carter had poured a lot of money into that fake investment opportunity. He was expecting an easy win, a quick profit. Instead, he walked straight into a fraud investigation. The investment firm he thought he was dealing with didn't exist. But the fake paper trail? That was real enough for authorities to take notice. By midday, his accounts were frozen, his assets were being reviewed. The SEC was involved. Carter wasn't just a doctor with a scandal anymore. He was a criminal under investigation. We didn't have to go after his family. Emily did that for us. By the afternoon, she had packed her things and left their mansion, not quietly either. She issued a public statement. "I am horrified by the revelations regarding my husband. I was deceived like so many others, and I will be taking immediate legal action to protect myself and my family." Translation, she was about to bleed him dry. And then, as if fate had a sense of poetic timing, at 6 p.m., Carter made the worst mistake of his life. He tried to deny everything. He called a press conference, standing in front of his clinic, surrounded by cameras. "This is nothing more than a coordinated attack on my reputation," he said, voice steady, mask still intact. "The so-called evidence is circumstantial at best. I have dedicated my life to helping families, and I will not be destroyed by baseless accusations." But then someone in the crowd shouted, "Dr. Carter, why did your own wife leave you today?" The cameras snapped toward him. His jaw clenched. He wasn't in control anymore. And that's when it happened. Someone threw a folder onto the podium right in front of him. A DNA report, his name, his DNA tied to dozens of children. He stared at it. He blinked. He swallowed. The cameras caught everything. The moment the mask cracked, the moment the world saw him for what he really was. The press conference ended in chaos. And Carter? He walked away. For the first time in his life, he had no words. It was over. By the next morning, Carter's entire life had unraveled. His clinic was shut down. His medical license was under review. Lawsuits were piling up, from patients, from investors, from women who now questioned every part of their pregnancies. Emily had gone nuclear, freezing their joint accounts, filing for divorce, demanding full control of their remaining assets. And the media? They weren't letting this go. He wasn't just disgraced, he was finished. And yet, the real punishment, the one that mattered, wasn't coming from the courts, the journalists, or the angry mob outside his mansion. It was waiting for him inside his study. Carter sat alone in the dimly lit room, his once pristine desk buried under legal notices, DNA test results, and half-empty whiskey glasses. He looked like a man who had aged a decade overnight. The arrogance, the confidence, it was gone. His hands were shaking as he reached for the single white envelope that had been slipped under his door. No return address, no markings, just his name. Inside, there was only one piece of paper. No threats, no accusations, just a single line, typed in bold black ink: "You destroyed 5 families. We only destroyed 1, yours." He read it once, then twice, then a third time. His breath came shallow. His fingers clenched the paper. Because in that moment, he understood. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. And there was nothing he could do to stop it.